Great. Well, hello and welcome to Darwin Day. And also happy Lunar New Year. And also happy Black History Month. My name is Chris O'Connor, and I'm a learning program developer here at the Royal BC Museum. The museum and my home is on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, here in Victoria on Vancouver Island. I'm an uninvited guest on these territories and grateful to live, learn, and raise a family on this land. And as we're having an event today about museums and collections, I am mindful of the history of harm museums around the world have done directly and indirectly through colonial practices of collection and representation, through centering white experience and often approaching collections through the lens of extraction, separating specimens, objects, belongings from the important context of land and history, as well as cultural practice. Museums around the world are going through important changes of fundamental ways of being, and I'm particularly grateful to our four guests today that are helping push forward change from a natural history perspective. They do their work on the shoulders of giants, like Charles Darwin, as well as thousands of years of traditional ecological knowledge. So I said I'm here in Victoria on Lekwungen speaking territories. That's that little dot at the bottom of Vancouver Island, if you have not been here before. Yukiko joins us from Vancouver. That's that bigger dot to the right, still in British Columbia. And Paul, I hope that I got Ottawa right. I tried to sort of place it right on the map. It's all the way in Ontario, in Ottawa. So just to sort of locate at least where the four of us are, and both Joel and Heidi are here at the museum with me today as well, different parts of the museum. So on this day, 215 years ago, Charles Darwin was born. Darwin lived a life of inquiry. He connected and communicated important insights about nature, and scientists around the world have been building on those insights ever since. Scientific inquiry, to me, is at its core a journey of curiosity and questioning, trying to understand the world around us, to better understand ourselves, and to find a way to best engage within this world in a responsible and joyful way. And a particular joy of natural history is the understanding of adaptation, how plants and animals change over time in response to their environment. Change is a constant, and some plants and animals are, well, kind of remarkable if you look at that change. So today I've invited four of my colleagues across Canada to bring forward one specimen. This is their challenge, a Darwin Day challenge. Bring forward one specimen or one species within your collection that is, to them, the most wild when it comes to adaptation, a superstar of adaptation, you might say. And they all accepted the challenge, so I'm really grateful for that. And if you're at home, I was saying earlier, I have a little cupcake in honor of the birthday of Charles Darwin. I'm able to be in a part of the museum where I can eat. Joel and Heidi, not so much. This is a day of celebration in terms of scientific inquiry. So first up, who took the challenge is Yukiko Stranger-Galey. So Yukiko has a background in biochemistry and microbiology and is the manager of exhibits at the Beaty Biodiversity Museum in Vancouver. So thank you so much for being here, Yukiko.
Thank you for having me. Chris, are you
and I'm going to share your, yes.
That would be wonderful, thank you. That's perfect. So thank you to Chris, and thank you to the Royal BC Museum, and thank you to everyone that's joining us here today. I am actually very excited to share this particular specimen from the Beaty Biodiversity Museum with you all today. It was quite a challenge to pick one, and I'm not saying that I picked everybody's favorite, but this is one that has a really interesting story, so I'm excited to share it with you. So this picture is actually the skull of a northern elephant seal. Now this skull is on display in the Beaty Biodiversity Museum, and it forms part of the cow and tetrapod collection at the museum on the campus of the University of British Columbia. It was actually collected by Ivor Johnson in 1944 on Pine Island in Heidi Gartner in BC. So northern elephant seals are extremely large seals. Males can weigh around 2,000 kilograms and actually be around 4 to 5 meters in length, which is about the length and weight of a car, and not just a small car. This is like a mid-size SUV. So it's a pretty large organism. And they are found in the Pacific Ocean, up and down the west coast of North America, from California all the way up to Alaska. But because they spend much of their time in the open ocean, we actually just don't see them very much, except for when they come to land. And they mostly come to land for either breeding or also for molting as well. And this particular animal has some really interesting adaptations, but it has one in particular that I think makes it an adaptation superstar. So if you can go forward one slide, Chris, please. Thank you. So we can see, oh, go back one. We can see here pictures of the actual live elephant seal itself. And the name elephant seal actually comes from the large nose appendage or proboscis that you can see really well highlighted here. It's almost like an elephant's trunk, hence the name. Now with these seals, the males have this large appendage and they actually fill them or inflate them with air, kind of like a balloon. And they can make a loud sound using them, which sounds a little bit like a drum. And this loud sound is used during the breeding season when males are competing and they're fighting, and it likely warns off other males from approaching into their direct area. If we move forward one slide, Chris. Thank you so much. You can see a little bit more of the elephant seal's body here. And several adaptations you can actually tell just by looking right at the seal itself. Now, the seal spends most of its life in the water. It's estimated that it spends around 9 months of its life in the water every year. And many of the adaptations that you can see have to do with its life in the water. So if you look at the shape of the seal's body, it's extremely streamlined and smooth, which makes it very easy to slip right through the water, making it a very efficient swimmer. And now if you have a look at its limbs, you can see both sets of limbs, the forelimbs and the hind limbs at the back, have been modified into flippers. And flippers are a wonderful adaptation that you can see in many different creatures. These animal flippers help enormously with swimming. Just like if we were to put flippers on when we go swimming in the ocean or in the pool, these flippers act kind of like a paddle, and they help the seal to push through the water, which means that it can swim faster, turn more efficiently, and it makes it just a faster, stronger, and more agile swimmer. So those are a few adaptations that you can tell just by looking at it. And these are incredible just in and of themselves. But the one I'm really excited to show you is actually something you can't tell just by looking at the animal. So it's not on their outside. So Chris, I'm going to ask you to go forward one more slide. Thank you. And we're back to the slide of the skull of the elephant seal. It's actually, the adaptation I'm going to tell you about is not actually to do with the skull. It's not even to do with the skeleton, but it is on the inside of the animal. And it's actually to do with their blood. So northern elephant seals spend a lot of time under the water, and they're diving for food during this time. They will dive pretty deep and for a long time in order to get the squid and the fishes that they feed on. Now, when they're at sea, it's been estimated that they can spend around 80 to 95% of their time, that's basically essentially most of their time, underwater. So some people actually call them surfacers rather than divers, because they actually spend most of the time in the water, just briefly surfacing now and again in order to breathe. So they will dive as far as 1 kilometer underneath the surface of the ocean, and they will often be under for about 30 minutes or so before coming up for air. And in fact, some of these seals have actually been recorded underwater for almost 50 minutes, which is a long time. So how do they do this? Most people, you and I, everyone at home, most people can hold their breath for around somewhere between 30 seconds to up to a couple of minutes. And like I said, it's not just once in a while that they do this. This is something the seals are doing again and again as they hunt on back-to-back dives. They'll dive for 20 to 30 minutes, and then they'll come up for a couple of minutes, and then they'll go back down again. So how do they do this? They have some adaptations like other deep diving animals. They will slow their heart rates down. They'll slow down some metabolic processes in their bodies as well. And all of this helps conserve oxygen. But they also do something very special. Now, the blood of a northern elephant seal is actually extremely thick. And it's very thick because it contains a lot of extra red blood cells in it. And this gives it its thickness, right? Its viscosity. So when these elephant seals are at the surface of the ocean, all of these red blood cells, all those extra red blood cells will be carrying oxygen. And they're actually able to store these extra red blood cells, instead of just going throughout their body in the bloodstream, they'll actually be able to store a good portion of them in one of their organs, actually in their spleen. And these red blood cells are already carrying the oxygen. So when they're on a very deep dive and running low on oxygen, they have this store of oxygenated red blood cells in their spleen, and their body will actually slowly start to trickle out to release some of these extra red blood cells into their bloodstream. And that gives them a little bit of oxygen. They can use that extra oxygen that's coming out, and they can keep going a little bit longer, a little bit deeper, just until they need to get that squid and come back up again. And this will actually help them manage that. So to me, this is just an incredible adaptation. If you think of it a little bit like in human terms, it's basically like carrying an extra oxygen tank with you, but inside of your own body. For when you're diving and your breath runs out, you can just turn on the valve, release a little bit more oxygen into your body, and this will allow you to keep diving a little bit longer and a little bit further. And this is why I think it's just such an incredible animal. This adaptation enables these northern elephant seals to dive for so long and so deep. And this is why I chose this particular specimen from the museum to share with you today. So in my mind, the northern elephant seal is really an adaptation superstar because of this ability. And I hope that now that all of you know a little bit more about this animal, I hope that you'll agree with me as well. So thank you so much for listening and for your attention. And I'm going to turn it back to Chris. And I know we'll hear some more really wonderful adaptations from the other panelists as well.
Thank you so much, Yukiko. That was fantastic. And it made me also think that saying adaptation superstar or all-star, but it's also almost like a superpower too, like the internal oxygen tank.
I know, it's definitely like a little bit of a superpower there, like a superhero power, absolutely.
And we did make the agreement in the beginning that wouldn't be a competition, but if you find yourself drawn especially to the elephant seal, then I can't say anything to that. So, but we have 3 other other species to explore, and the next one is from Dr. Joel Gibson. So Joel Gibson is the curator of entomology here at the Royal BC Museum, and is 6 floors up from where I am right now. Hello, Joel.
Hi, Chris. Thanks. And thanks for everybody for coming to talk. I did wear my Darwin t-shirt today, which turned out to be the same photograph that you already showed. So apparently that's the one photograph everybody has with Darwin with his cool beard.
There were a lot of good photos, but that one in particular, I really
It's the beard. It's the beard and the hat.
And Joel, I would just to say everyone out in who's watching, Joel tried to grow his beard as long as Darwin, but it was a good try.
I can't get it long enough or white enough yet. Give me a few more years of working in the museum and we'll see what happens. But I have, one of the advantages I have of being right up here in the collection right now is I can just show you things right now. And the biggest challenge that Chris gave me was to pick like one adaptation all-star. Like I can't narrow it down to 1,000. Like that's not an exaggeration. We have 35,000 species of insects that, you know, I'd like to talk about. And each one of them, if you take it and look under the scope or watch it in nature, you're going to find something about it that's amazing. And some of the people in the chat have already pointed out beetles that look like other beetles, beetles that have moved from one part of the world to another and adapted to living on different plants. So there's a story about every one of them, but that wasn't the challenge. The challenge wasn't to say, why are insects as a whole the coolest adapted group? That wasn't the question. The question was, pick a species and talk about adaptations on Darwin Day. So I can do that, but you know, bear in mind, if we do this every day for the next few years, I'll have a different one every day, but I'm not gonna do that. Also, considering that I'm in the collection, I did not pick one of these. These are great, but you can't see them, and they're very tiny. These are the little flies I like to work on. And, you know, these happen to be March flies, and they have a great adaptation story and everything else. Way too small. That being said, it's not going to be nearly as big as Kiko's elephant seal. I don't have anything that big. But I do have one of the biggest things I can show you that I can talk about in the terms of adaptation, because it shows up good on the camera, and I have one right here. And oh, look at that. That even showed up nicely too. Look at that. And I'll just keep periodically putting it up there and then going back to my face and up and back. And if you want to see something, let me know. I'll even show you a few highlight things that I want to talk about. But Darwin, to really, really badly paraphrase, and those of you that have read Origin of Species or one of his other books, feel free to cringe as I say this, but Darwin had three things with adaptation. To have a successful species, you got to eat, you got to not get eaten, and you got to have babies. That's it. That's Origin of Species whittled down into 3 sentences. So any adaptation has to do with one of those 3 things. Is it helping you eat? Is it helping you to not get eaten? Is it helping you to have babies? And I picked the Polyphemus moth, which, oh, I didn't even say that, what the name of it was. Antheria Polyphemus. Oh, wait, is that written backwards? Oh, okay. On mine, it looks like it's backwards. I'm like, I didn't realize that.
You see it backwards. You see it the right way for us.
I should have written it in mirror writing, but I can't do that. Antheria Polyphemus, or the Polyphemus moth, has a couple of adaptations that help it to do one of those 3 things, which I think it's neat. I also like the fact, like Kiko, and we weren't given this direction, I like that we picked sort of, not just a BC species. This is things people here in BC have seen. This is also a species, other places in Canada, people have seen it too. So if you've seen this giant moth, this tends to be one of the moths that people most likely send me an email and freak out about. Not because they're scared, just because they're super excited. They're like, oh, this showed up on my porch and it's huge. I think I may have seen the largest insect in history. And they always will send me this email, and it's exciting, but 9 times out of 10, it's a Polyphemus moth. There's one other giant moth that it sometimes is too, but it's just a moth. Like, how is that an adaptation all-star? Like, it's not the most poisonous, it's not the biggest, it's not the scariest, but it's got a few things that are amazing when you think about those 3 questions. So the 3 was, what was it? You got to eat. Well, one way to get around that problem with a Polyphemus moth is they don't eat. The one way to get around needing to eat is to not eat. And the adults, for the most part, don't really feed. They've got these coiled mouth parts that sort of feed on nectar, but in such a low amount that it's not really restricting adults. So they can live in places and at times of the year where there's not really that much to eat because the adults just don't have to eat. And the key to eating is to not steal food from your babies. If you're eating the same thing your kids are eating, one of you is going to be more hungry and compete with each other. Well, they get around this problem too, because the caterpillars eat and the adults don't. That's a brilliant adaptation. Just don't compete with your own children. So the larvae, which we know as caterpillars, are big, fat, green caterpillars you'll see. Also, they're well adapted in being very hungry. If you've read The Very Hungry Caterpillar, it's not specifically about a Polyphemus, but it is about very hungry caterpillars. And they're also not picky. You'll find them on maple trees, oak trees, willow trees, birch trees. They'll kind of just crawl around wherever they end up, munch away at enough leaves until they're big enough. Then they'll pupate into a cocoon, drop onto the ground for the winter, and then in the spring pop out as one of these. That's a great adaptation, is don't eat at the same time as your parents, and then you'll never have to compete for food. Very good adaptation. So that's one, don't eat. 2, don't get eaten. Which you think, this is pretty big and obvious. How is it not getting eaten? It's easy, fly at night. If you fly at night, you're not gonna get eaten by a bird because birds sleep at night. So that's one thing moths get around, fly at night. And even if they happen to get seen by a bird during the day, they've got, oh wait, I'll try to do this without breaking it. They've got these eye spots. Now it might not look like it to you, but imagine this just kind of blending in the trees, doesn't look like much, and then poof, a pair of big eyes come out about the size and shape of an owl. If you're a small robin-sized bird that's about to grab it and you see a giant owl, they fly away right away. It's really effective. It's just a couple of big scary eyes at just the right moment will pretty much scare away most birds during the day, even some lizards and things like that. And here we have wall lizards. It's less likely these are going to get eaten because of those eyes. Also, little Greek history lesson. That's also why they're called Polyphemus moths. Polyphemus from the legend of the Cyclops. That was one of the Cyclops characters was named Polyphemus, which doesn't take into account there's 2 of them. So I don't understand. It's supposed to look like 2 Cyclopses, which doesn't make sense. It's a Biclops. So
that's even more scary, 2 Cyclopses. So
2 Cyclopses standing really close together. So I will, okay, the next thing, adaptation, they're scales, which I can't show you because they're really, really tiny, which cover the wings and make it colorful and powdery. Just in the last couple of years, scientists have found that the scales are actually microstructured so that they interfere with bats' echolocation. They muffle the sound when bats send out sound waves, and some moths have better coatings on them than others, so that it's actually hard for bats to hear them with their echolocation at night because they're covered with these scales. So it's sort of like a soundproof room. If you're in a recording studio or something like that, it muffles the sound. And scientists have found that these scales, which would be great in the future if you could make like soundproof clothing made out of butterfly scales because of its microstructure. One last thing before I squeeze in, which is to have babies. And that is if we look really close, see the antenna on there? They're kind of big and feathery. That's how I know this is a male. They're really good because if you consider they're only flying at night, they don't have good vision. They can't see anything. How do they find each other? With the big antenna. They can smell with their antenna. So those are males. They can detect females that are putting out plumes of scent. So basically the males fly around at night with their eyes closed, just smelling in directions with their antenna until they can find each other, which is a really good adaptation because then you're able to successfully mate at a time you're not going to get attacked by bats or birds. You can find each other, mate, have babies, and not eat. So you don't even have to go on a date and buy dinner. You just find each other, mate, lay eggs, and that's it. So 3 adaptations in a relatively common, boring kind of moth. So there you go. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Joel. You froze right at the end. Perfect timing. That was fantastic. And I think that the framing of those 3 points of consideration are really helpful. It makes me think back to the elephant seal and seeing it through those 3 perspectives as well. So I wanted to just at this point, now that we've heard 2 of the presentations from 4, just for everyone watching, if you have a question for Yukiko or for Joel, and you want to put in the comment section of Facebook Live or the chat section of Zoom, in particular with the 2 species that they were bringing forward, you could do that. You could do that now. Just take a little break for questions or thinking about some connections. We did have one comment from Donna Joel saying that she'd wants to get your shirt.
Oh, this was from an exhibit at the Field Museum in Chicago in 2008. Yeah. So you'll need a time machine.
Oh, and Dana asks, Joel, can you put the spelling of the moth you featured in the...
Oh, wait, you know what? I can put it in the chat.
Yeah, I put it in the chat.
You know, Chris, you mentioned that you were interested in having a spleen with oxygenated blood.
Yeah, as a superpower.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I really want the soundproof scales for my apartment.
Totally.
Just like as a general, like, oh, okay, that's nice.
Living
Wait, so then
inside
you
of
can
noise canceling headphones.
yeah, yeah.
There's a
All right,
lot
so
of
we
animal
so we now
adaptation.
have two superpowers,
Mhm.
the spleen oxygen tank and the scales for sound. Kiko, you were gonna.
Oh, I was just saying that it's the same with so many adaptations with animals. I just feel like you kind of want to see them in the human world too, right? You want to be able to take them, take advantage of them, and think that if they have these really amazing things, I kind of want a little bit of that too.
Yeah. Mm. So maybe that's the competition at the end, is just which superpower out of these four species would you most like to have? So now we have two out of the four. And we'll go on to our third presentation. So next up is Paul Sokolov, who's a senior research assistant in botany at the Canadian Museum of Nature in Ottawa. So glad to have you here, Paul.
So glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Chris. And thank you, Yukiko and Joel, for your great presentations. Not that I have a particular affiliation for a collection that I work with, but obviously I'm going into the herbarium, our plant and lichen collection for the one that I picked. And I'm just going to share my screen now. So Xanthoria elegans, the elegant sunburst lichen. This is the one that I think really personifies this adaptability that's important for survival in this world. And there are a few reasons for that, and I'm going to get into them. But first, I think it is a lichen, and it's always good to go back into what exactly is a lichen, because we don't talk about lichens enough in our everyday life, at least according to me. So a lichen is a fungus and an algae or cyanobacteria, which we call a photobiont, that live together. So this is a diagram of a lichen here, and very simplified. But you've got all these fungal hyphae that encapsulate these photosynthetic partners. And in Xanthoria elegans, these are a green algae called Tribouxia that you see in the corner here. And they live together for mutual benefit. The fungus protects the algae, which can't always live in all the places it wants to on planet Earth without that protection. Although Tribouxia can be found in lots of interesting environments by itself. And in return for that protection, the sugars from the photosynthetic partner are fed to the algae, enough for that, so both parties are happy. And so this is a really powerful adaptation. And in fact, this is the adaptation I want to highlight. It's the superpower of living together in harmony. And so, in my condo here in Ottawa, that's what I'll tell my husband. We are living together in harmony like a lichen, or at least that's what we're trying to do. Okay, so this is a lichen, and Xanthoria elegans is a very common lichen species. And in fact, as Yukiko and Joel mentioned, this is also one that you would see in British Columbia. And the specific specimen I wanted to highlight is this one here. This is Xanthoria elegans that was collected on a caribou antler on Axel Heiberg Island in Nunavut, in Inuit Nunangat in Canada, the Inuit homeland in Canada. And this is where I do most of my work. And I've actually been very fortunate to travel to this place. And I did not collect this particular specimen, but that's okay, because like all of the other museum specimens we've looked at, they have been cataloged and preserved. And in this case, digitized in such a way that I don't even have to be at the collection itself to see it. I can look at it through my home, thanks to our awesome collections team. So this particular specimen here is found growing on caribou antler, but this species can grow on rocks, on sometimes signs, like metal signs, anywhere it finds a perch that it can stay for a relatively long amount of time undisturbed, it can grow fairly well. So this particular specimen is the eastern side of Axel Heiberg Island, not too far from a large petrified forest. And this it can resist cold, it can resist desiccation, and it can resist UV radiation. These are all adaptations that help it, survive on the tundra. There's another adaptation too that I think is really neat for this particular species, is that it's nitrophilous. It loves nitrogen, and we all do. We're living organisms. We're based on amino acids. Nitrogen's important to us, but this one in particular loves to be found on bird cliffs, where lots of bird droppings provide excess nitrogen for this species to live. So, if lichens in general are a great example of partnership, Xanthoria elegans is a great example of making the most of a crappy situation. And I mentioned that it's found all over the Arctic. It's also found in other extreme environments on planet Earth. And in fact, you can find it growing in the Utah desert. And this is a picture in the desert of Southeast Utah, where people actually simulate missions to Mars. And this is a species that can grow in environments that look a little bit and are geologically a lot like Mars here on Earth. And in fact, this species can be found all over the planet. This is a range map. All of these are collections of the species taken from GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. Each one of these dots, and most of them are good records, show that Xanthoria elegans was growing at this particular place at this particular time. So all over North America, all over Europe, throughout Asia and Africa and South America, Oceania to a lesser degree, and Antarctica. This species can be found everywhere. And that's because it can send its spores. Its spores are light enough that they can be carried in the jet stream. They can float all over planet Earth. And as long as those spores find another trabuxia, another algae somewhere else to land on and become a new lichen with, they'll be fine. And so, being light enough to fly through the air, that's a superpower right there. And it's not just on planet Earth. Xanthoria elegans is so adaptable and so good at resisting desiccation and UV radiation that scientists from the European Space Agency actually put it on the outside of the International Space Station. On this palette here, this is called the Exposed to experiment. They put the lichens on the outside of the space station for 18 months. No spacesuit, just kind of out there in the radiation, out, kind of where we would not want to be. And when they brought these lichens back in, they were still alive. They could still metabolize, they could still do their thing. I mean, I'm sure they were probably a little groggy after 18 months in space, but like, honestly, see an astronaut do that? You can't. So maybe lichens are better astronauts than us. And while we haven't trained them yet to do tasks on the International Space Station, I think it's remarkable that this particular species is so adaptable and so evolved to living in hard environments that it can survive outside of the planetary biosphere that it evolved in. And I think, for all those reasons, I think Xanthoria elegans, the elegant sunburst lichen, is an adaptation all-star, and it's also my favorite color. So I think that's a win.
I would say that's a win for sure. So yeah, so I'm wondering the superpower, is it the ability to travel, or is it the ability to withstand extreme environments? What would you say of that?
I think it's both. I think it's the ability to travel, but also I think it's the ability to get other places, because sometimes we know, if we're not happy here, we gotta go. You don't like your apartment, you gotta find a better one. This lichen does it well, and it can go far. So I think, yeah, maybe a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
And I noticed that there were some of those dots that were in the Atlantic Ocean. Is that because they were on islands, or were they found floating on something?
Well, sometimes those are islands, and sometimes those are records that you take to your collection manager and say, hey, maybe we need to check the coordinates on this. And I see some collection managers in the gallery laughing because they know. And thank you, collection staff.
Speaking of which, we'll go to our last presenter. Last but certainly not least, speaking of all-star or superstar collection manager here at the Royal BC Museum, the collection manager of invertebrates, Heidi Gartner. And I was saying that Joel is on the 6th floor, so 6 floors above where I am now. Heidi is 1 floor below because what she's looking after is really heavy. So it's important to have that not on the 6th floor. So thanks, Heidi, for being here, and it will be the last species that we talk about today. And
Great.
Heidi said earlier that she was maybe going to change at the last moment, so I'm so curious.
Yeah, thank you to my co-presenters. You've done an incredible job, and I literally changed 5 minutes beforehand, and now I still don't know. But my new favorite fact I think I might share is that lichens are better astronauts than humans, and I think that's be my favorite quote of today. Yeah, so I'm the collection manager for invertebrates, so animals without backbones, and like everyone else has discussed, that within the realm of the biological world, there's so many amazing adaptations. So originally today I was going to talk to you about an animal that has adapted to an extreme environment, but instead I'm going to talk about one of my favorite animals, which has multiple adaptations and kind of hits all the points that Joel talked about. You know, really good at avoiding being eaten, really good at eating, and really good at making babies. So all right, everyone, this is the giant Pacific octopus, Antheria Octopus delphini. It is one of our predators here that we have here on the BC coast. This is an incredible animal. It is becoming world renowned for how smart they are in the invertebrate world. They eat all kinds of things really fast. They're really good predators. And so I'm going to talk to you about some interesting adaptations that they have that allow them to live this life. So first of all, Google octopuses doing stuff. It's so cool. They can do everything from opening jars to get at food. They've been known to have personalities. They have incredible camouflage. There's so many amazing videos. I could show them, but we don't have the time. But one of the first things that I'm going to tell you about is how they're able to do this, how they're able to be good predators, and how they're able to be so smart. Is this animal, believe it or not, has 9 brains. So they are octopus, also known as 8-legged animals. So they have 8 arms that they use to move around on and also to grab prey. As you can see, they've got these really strong suckers on each of those arms. So at the top of each arm, it's just out of view here, essentially is a brain. There's a concentration of neurons. So each arm can act independently of the others. So it can be grabbing a prey, and that arm already is talking and relaying information back up and down the leg to be able to manipulate these animals. And then that's all talking to the main brain as well. So they have 9 brains. They're also really fast. So they have 3 hearts. They have 1 heart that circulates the blood throughout the body, and then they have 2 hearts that circulate the blood out to their gills. So if you think about when you do a big burst of energy, you're chasing after your prey, they can send oxygen right to their gills so that they can breathe. Have no big deal. They can do all their big chasing. Another amazing adaptation, this is kind of cool, it kind of relates to Yukiko's, is that they have blue blood. We all have red blood. We have hemoglobin. They have a hemocyanin, and it is a copper bonding one, and it makes their blood blue. But this actually allows them to adapt to a greater range of temperature ranges, and so that because they don't migrate the same way, say you're a bird and you're really cold, you want to move. Octopuses don't have that same sort of luxury. They kind of have dens, they live in an ocean, and by having this blood, they can tolerate these wider ranges of things. And then last but not least, my favorite is watching videos of octopus do their camouflage. So this is a dead species, I'm sorry to say, or a dead specimen. But even in this video here, you can see, even in their dead state, this is an eye. let's see, sorry. See how populated it is near that eye? And then these ridges up here. When you're watching a live animal, they can change to blend into their environment in incredible ways. So they have this incredible texture to their skin, and they can blend in so they can't be eaten, or so that they can surprise an animal that they want to attack. They also have something that's a little bit less harder here, is they have really colorful skin. So they have these things on them called chromatophores, which is color, basically muscles, and when they expand them, it becomes that color, and when they contract them, they go white. So these can flash everything from white. They can open up chromatophores of one color, close them of the other. It creates this beautiful mosaic on their body, and they can even use it to communicate. So often when you'll see breeding pairs, they kind of flash at each other, whether they're receptive or about to fight, males, that sort of thing. So those are some of the amazing adaptations of octopus. My last thing I'd say about them is just, we are still not fully understanding how intelligent these animals are. They can solve problems, all those sorts of fun things, but they've also found that they have personalities. And I've even heard of everything from some living in an aquarium, and the aquarium person going to feed them stale squid for a second day in a row, and the squid looking at them and then going and putting it in the drain, being like, no way, I'm not eating this stuff another day. How dare you deign to feed me this? So look up everything you can on octopus. They're amazing. Oh, and they're babies, adorable baby there. Is they have this really amazing reproductive, they don't live super long, octopus. And actually they usually die after they reproduce. But the females, they lay these gorgeous dens of eggs, and they aerate them, they care for them, they stop eating, but they care for their babies for months and months. And they've even discovered one species of octopus that can do it for up to 3 years before passing away. And then their little babies go off to the ocean, and they usually reproduce with like large volumes of babies because their parents aren't there to care for them. So I think I hit all the points. And if we have nothing else to talk about, I have another animal.
What was your other animal?
A deep sea tube worm from hydrothermal vents.
You want to quickly show us?
No, because then I'll end up talking about them and steal everyone's time.
Okay. And Heidi, there were so many superpowers for an octopus, like 9 brains, 3 hearts.
Blue blood.
Color, yeah, blue blood.
Special skin that you can change colors and like looks anytime.
So maybe let's and yes, the
so I win.
adorable baby is is also a superpower. So, but I like that idea of that changing color, and I think probably a lot of us have seen that through video, that with octopuses being able to do that. So we'll do a little time for questions for all 4 presenters. But while we're thinking of questions out there in Zoom and Facebook Live, if you were able to pick one superpower from the 4 adaptation all-stars so far, so you could choose to have an oxygen tank internal to your body so that you can go swimming for up to 50 minutes underwater. You can choose to be able to like exist in really extreme environments, and also travel at the whim, or you could have scales that would muffle your sound or the sound that's around you, or you can change color. It could be your clothes and your skin, and you could blend into wherever you are. So those are your 4 choices. What would you choose? So in the chat and Zoom or in the comment section on Facebook Live, you get to choose one. Here's your opportunity. It's only on Darwin's birthday that you get to get a new superpower. So what would that be? So Jennifer says oxygen tank. Yeah, Kiko?
Can I just say that I think that for me, all of them are so amazing. but it's a lot dependent on when, right? Timing is everything. Like right now, I would choose travel because I really miss that. I really miss that. So I would choose travel right now, but other times there might be other things.
That's fair. And Dennis says camouflage. Joel says deep space travel like Captain Marvel. Jesse would like to have 9 brains. That's fair. And Robin would like to be the Lichen. Like to be the Lichen. Multiple brains, superpower of the spleen. So we give actually really nice like distribution of the superpowers, which is good because we can't all have the same superpower. It's nice to spread it out. So while you're thinking of your superpower, also, just I want to say those 4 presentations are so great. Like really, they're really made me think about just the wonder of nature, but also just how you brought that out. I really appreciated all 4 of your presentations. Joel, you had a question earlier. I think it was Robin who said, we distinguish moths and butterflies in part by fuzziness of antenna. What else distinguishes them? And is there a species that might be a descendant of the intermediary between the 2 groups?
Well, that's a great question. And yeah, you're right. Fuzzy antenna and flies at night, that's a moth. Skinny antenna and flies during the day, that's a butterfly. But in between, there's things that have hooked antenna and fly at sunset. They're called skippers, and they are actually in between the 2. So there's kind of in between moths and butterflies are skippers. So yeah, and it's usually by time of day, although there's exceptions. You find day flying moths and night flying butterflies, but without those exceptions, yeah, you're right. That is the good way. Antenna's usually a good way to tell the difference too.
While other questions are coming in as well, I'm wondering if, with the 4 of you, if you'd like to ask any questions to each other. What did you hear that you were like, oh, that's interesting. It may, like that's an interesting connection to what I'm studying or like what I'm interested in, or something that you didn't know about. Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
Are the lichens always told by like the shape and the color you see in the field, or do you have to look under the scope to tell which lichen it is?
Paul might have froze for a second. I think he went away. He's going to come back. So hold that thought, Joel. Oh, he's back.
Sorry about that.
No, that's good. Did you hear the question, Paul?
I did not. I'm operating on lichen speed, apparently.
Oh, yeah. Joel can ask it.
It was with lichens in the field, because I've never studied them. Are they usually identified by like the shape and the color in the field, or do you have to get them back to the museum under the microscope to tell what species it is?
That's a good question. Sometimes you have a good idea of what it is. However, like to be absolutely certain, you do have to bring it back. And often what we're doing is chemical tests. So we'll actually put a little spot of say bleach or potassium iodide on it to see if it changes color. But we also have to section out the spores and look at those under a microscope, or do chemical analysis through thin layer chromatography. And so doing all of that is really hard in the field. And I should say that I'm only like a sometimes lichenologist. Most of my work is in vascular plants. And my lichen colleagues are maybe a little jealous of the superpower of vascular plants, because we can just look at something and be like, oh, it's pretty sure it's that. Let's get the hand lens. Oh yeah, of course. Maybe that's well, it's not necessarily a superpower, but more indicative of how complex lichens are.
Cool. Paul, Jesse asked if you could write the species genus name in the chat of the lichen.
Absolutely.
Great. Any other questions amongst the panelists, or any other questions out in in the Zoom room or on Facebook Live.
I'm really curious now about that little that tube worm. I don't know, I don't want to make you say a whole bunch about it, but can you just give us like a little snippet? Because I'm really curious now.
Yeah. So my other animal I was going to talk about was an animal that's adapted to an extreme environment. So off of the BC coast, we have these essentially underwater volcanoes. So 2 kilometers under the ocean floor, where the tectonic plates are moving apart, magma superheats the water. And this water gets to be like 300 degrees Celsius. And because it's kind of getting heated up by like the magma and all that earth crust, it's really metallic. It's got like a lot of sulfur in it, that sort of thing. And there's these animals that live there, like in this like 300-degree water. And what it is they're tube worms. And this is what they look like when they come back. These can be really, really tall. And yes, they're inside a parchment tube, but I'll show you what a really fun drawing I did for kids. So this is what a hydrothermal vent looks like when it's, you know, spewing out the superheated water. And then these tube worms are right beside it. And what's amazing is they actually changed the way we understand life on this planet. You know, we all thought life was from photosynthesis, the sun making energy. But what we found out is that life can be based on chemosynthesis, so turning metals and chemicals into energy. And it's from these animals. So when they're alive, they have this head that's bright red, and it can super suck the minerals and all that stuff out of the water. And then it passes it to a part of its body where it has a symbiotic bacteria living in it. And this bacteria is what does what plants would do, the photosynthesis, but they do it with chemicals. And how this animal helped to tell that, change what we thought about the world, was because they have no mouth, they have no anus, they had no idea how these animals were actually feeding until they discovered, oh my gosh, they're drawing this from the water, they're symbiotic with bacteria, and life can live down here in these extreme environments. There's other animals as well, but these are one that are kind of particularly fascinating for being able to show that. So could you imagine living in minus 300 degrees Celsius with no stomach, no mouth, no eyes, really, just some really feathery bits, and then you pull into a tube when someone comes by to eat you. So that was going to be my other one.
Okay, thanks, Heidi. And we have a question actually from Cheryl, which is a really good question. And actually, I think it, well, I'm wondering if maybe I'll end with that question, but there's one other question from, I think, Robin. Paul, can you talk a little bit about the recent realization that lichens are not only fungus and algae as we used to think?
I think so, and I think that question is talking a little bit about a recent study that found that there's a third symbiont in the relationship, at least some of the time, and these are yeasts that are part of this association. And that was work done by Toby Sperbilli at University of Alberta, sorry. And yeah, their research team found that there were yeasts in this association, which most people wouldn't have thought, and certainly you didn't really see when you were doing sections. So this is interesting, and it doesn't seem to be all lichen species. It only seems to be certain ones. But yeah, certainly I think there are some. Yeah, as we're exploring these things, and as we develop new technologies, we're finding a lot more about species that we used to think we knew pretty well. And so, yeah, I think lichens we're gonna see some interesting things come out, not only of lichens, but all of our subfields where there's emerging technologies, DNA sequencing, new scanning electron and confocal microscopy. I think that'll be really cool.
Heidi says bacteria and yeast are changing the world. All right, so in the last 5 minutes, Cheryl has a question that really gets to the heart of this. So I'd love to get a minute response from each of you, which is, why is it important for us to know about how living things adapt? Who would like to go first with that? Yeah.
That's a great question. I'm going to go first because he's quiet right now.
I think that there's lots of specific reasons, but I just want to think as a sort of an overall high-level view. I think it's really important that we understand these adaptations, because the more we understand about them, the more we understand about how these different organisms are sharing the world with us. And I think that's really important, because when we understand more about the world and how it's living, then we can understand how our actions and how our daily choices are affecting those organisms. And through that, we can work together to sort of create a better environment to make sure that these ecosystems, these species are protected, whatever their lifestyle is, that we are protecting that and making sure that in turn, that the world is healthier and better for all of us.
Thank you, Kika. Who would like to maybe add on that or take it in a different direction?
I also like the idea that learning about adaptations helps us to understand the diversity. Like, why isn't everything exactly the same? And I also like, it's like not really a question you ever get to answer. You go out in the field, and especially for those of us in the kind of field where we're in the museum world and we see lots of diversity, there's the question of, why do we need 900 different types of beetles in this one forest? And when you do start to look at it, you're like, oh, they're all micro adapted to some little situation, some little thing that they're eating, some, you know, different time of year that they're coming out, or all these adaptations are allowing a great variety. And I kind of like it in the bigger sense that, you know, diversity, everything is different because it's living the way it's got to live. And it's a nice feeling in the museum world, but I also kind of like to look in the world in general. Is diversity is a good thing because people are doing what they got to do. I mean, species are doing what they got to do.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Paul or Heidi?
I think I'd like to build a little bit off of that and just say that, you know, I talked a little bit about collections and how we all work in collections, but I think, you know, we build collections because they're useful to us, but they're also useful to future generations. And I think by understanding diversity now, we're laying out, you know, more information for future generations to build off in exciting and new ways. And I think that's you know, kind of what drives a lot of us is that, hey, look, what we're doing here hopefully will be useful to the world in new and innovative and better ways. And I think that's probably something we all hope. And I talked about space a lot because I'm a bit of a space nerd, but we still live on the coolest planet with amazing adaptations, and just being able to look at what's out there on a professional level is such a treat and a privilege, and I'm grateful for that.
Great, thanks, Paul. And Heidi?
Yeah, I think that I'll just build off my colleagues, and yeah, like biodiversity is the kind of foundation of all science. You know, it's if you can't name a specimen and you don't know what a species is, it's kind of what everything builds off. But particularly in study adaptations, I think it's something really topical right now, particularly with the amount of change that is happening in our world. And that's something really we have to think about, is we are in an unprecedented time for climate change. We're also altering the world in other ways, and considering the adaptations of animals and who is going to be able to adapt, who isn't, what are we doing to our world? I think that's something to really think about as well right now. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Heidi. Just as we're ending right now, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to pull up something. I just wanted to say thank you so much to the four of you, and thanks everyone for joining in. I was like debating about whether we should sing happy birthday, but I've been on the receiving end of some Zoom happy birthday songs, and it just doesn't quite work. It doesn't like match up. So, but I do want to say, as a sort of final thought on Darwin Day, just wanted to say that I think of Darwin Day as an opportunity to reflect on influence and inspirations and the continuum of knowledge creation and construction, communicating and learning. And as it is Black History Month, I just want to end by acknowledging that Charles Darwin learned to do taxidermy from John Edmonston, a Black man and a freed slave who was teaching in Edinburgh when Darwin was in medical school there. So without his influence, without the influence and the guidance of John Edmonston, who knows where we'd be now. So I love that, like, we are being influenced and we are influencing all of the time. And I really appreciate the four of you for bringing, actually the five of you, because Kiko, you're baby as well. Really inspiring us as we go on this journey of discovery together. So, and thanks everyone for joining on Zoom and on Facebook Live. And until next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.